We start with the local community coming out for the annual Lionheart Day celebrations, which was named after that chubby chocolate mentor chap with the dodgy fake dreadlocks and what got himself shot up 10 years ago. Anyway, little John is feeling bittersweet today, given he watched said chubby chocolate mentor get capped by his arch nemesis Guy Gisborne a decade ago. And also, he's still pretty butthurt over his kind of sort of girlfriend knocking her mum's lesbian lawyer last week. But she says it was all just part of a last minute ruse to avoid getting caught snooping in John Prince's office, so shut up about it already. And speak of the devil, said John Prince fella soon turns up in the local community hall and says he wants to talk things out like grown adults, given the hood totally kidnapped his son last week at his own birthday party, and this shit has now gone way too far, son. After the opening titles, Robyn tells Marion that the little smooch she had last epi with her mum's legal professional was a total mistake, bro. And they certainly won't be doing any more saucy snogging in small private offices, and so she better keep stum about it already. Before Tressie and her lawyer meet with John in their apartment, who totally knows Tressie's legal representative who's suspiciously working on this random case pro bono, because turns out she went to school with his son Chet and she... A little later, Robyn reveals how she lived up to her name and totally stole some keys off Marion earlier, which just so happens to have that suspicious USB stick on them what she weirdly tried to cover up last epi. Meanwhile, John tells Tressie how he used to play in these buildings when he was young and watching his father build the towers, and also how he used to draw all over the walls with crayons.
Okay.
Before reminding her that once Bill 121 is inevitably passed next week, the city was selling the Sherwood Towers and they'll all be evicted like some budget Big Brother contestants. And even after he kindly says he's willing to provide new homes for them in developments all around the city to prevent them being homeless, she still refuses the totally generous and reasonable offer, because she don't want to move into a brand spanking new gaff free of charge if it means losing that community spirit, and promptly throws it all back in his face.
Nice.
Naturally, the Asian mayor then turns up to negotiate a compromise, given he's already got investments tied up in this place and she won't accept perfectly reasonable and generous offers to not be made homeless and shit. Elsewhere, Tech Boy Tuck arrives and says he's brought some snacks, which all turn out to be insects, given he's apparently a Klaus Schwab superfan what is already eating bugs and being happy for some reason. And before you can say, is this some kind of subliminal programming on behalf of the World Economic Forum, Robyn bursts in and puts the poor fella to work, despite him just trying to relax on his one day off, by giving him the stolen USB drive to see what naughty secrets are on it and stuff. But he just says it's probably encrypted if it belongs to a dodgy high-flying billionaire. And before she can say, no shit Sherlock, that's why I'm giving it to you as my resident tech expert for fuck's sake, little John reminisces about his deaded mentor Lionheart, when suddenly his terrible acting is soon interrupted by John's arch nemesis Guy Gisborne and his big boobied floozy. So naturally, little Jonathan openly and publicly threatens the poor sod in broad daylight, before Robyn tells him to cool his jets, because she's got a litigious capitalist and a small Asian mayor in her living room who are trying to sort out a rather serious and sensitive case, so they can't really afford to start any ghetto gangland street beef and risk it all falling apart. Speaking of beef, John and Tressie are still passively aggressively arguing about their conflicting goals, whilst Tuck's decryption gear finally decodes the contents of Prince's stolen property, and an infuriated Robyn soon confronts her mum's lesbo lawyer, because she's found evidence of payments going from John to Marion, and also holiday snaps of her getting cosy with him, and now feels like a right mug upon realising how convenient it was that her mum catches a charge and her sexy lawyer just drops straight into their lap on a pro bono case. But Marion says, calm your titties, bro, because that John Prince fella killed my daddy, given he was his business partner and stumbled upon some vague and secret thing what he shouldn't have and totally got himself killed for it. So I'm trying to bring him down for my own personal vendetta. And he was just sending me money thinking it could keep me quiet. So I accepted it out of simple self-preservation, and so I could quietly keep myself off his radar whilst I planned my sweet, sweet revenge. Was some shit. But a hilariously naive Robyn just can't believe a qualified lawyer would lie for personal gain, and so she defo ain't going to be sucking her face off no more now the trust is totally gone. Meanwhile, the freckly ginger sheriff totally bollocks the dopey bloke who got sent to prison 10 years ago for carrying a gun, for now waltzing into Sherwood strapped up with a shooter. But he says he crashed the party and stirred shit up like she asked, but nobody really cared, bro. So naturally, she steps on his ball back and says if you don't do a Ray Epps and provoke these people into doing stupid shit what they'll regret for years to come and that I can then use as an excuse to clamp down with an iron fist, then I'm going to send you back to prison. And you'll never again get boozy with your big boobied floozy. Later, her sister bollocks her for not being around much lately and for not helping her take care of their crippled mum. And Robyn just can't believe she's being lectured to by some teenage racialist in whiteface. Before that Gisborne guy crashes the party yet again, also in whiteface. Meanwhile, Robyn vents to Little John about all the drama what's going on, but he just shrugs and piles on some more, because he's still super jealous about being second fiddle to a small legal lesbian. But Robyn says she's had enough of that phony fakey babe marrying bird what's a total liar and has been playing them since day one, and she totally wants to be with him now that she don't really have any other choice. But before he can hide the pain and totally celebrate now becoming her first choice for lover by sheer default, Alan bursts in and says some buggers are on stage doing cringy freestyles whilst cosplaying as honkies. Well, some shit. And outside, they totally see said racist bugger, who's performing a terrible and barely comprehensible rap about that Lionheart fella, aka his own murder victim. So naturally, the gang change into their hood gear and totally perform their own cringy raps, given they don't want to resort to violence and thereby escalate any tensions and be arrested by corrupt cops just looking for an excuse to bust them. Whilst upstairs, Tressie offers a compromise for Princey Boy by asking him to build schools, shops and parks right beside his luxury condos next door, so the rich and poor can live side by side and stuff. But he says no fucker's going to buy lavish flats living next to some stinking ghetto full of communist thugs, before then lamenting on how much of a shame it is that they can't be friends. Because she says she don't really want to be friends with some rich dick what sent the filth to cripple her nuisance ass, even though all he did was call the cops on a bunch of protesters who wouldn't leave private property when politely asked to, and her shooting seemed like a total freak accident and she. But bizarrely, he then seems to consider the deal.
What?
And after the two groups cut each other's mics off and Guy taunts Little John by telling the crowd how their mate just let Lionheart's killer get away scot-free with his murder, a naughty sheriff sends her goons in to arrest the troublemakers now there's a hint of trouble and shit's about to kick off, and totally tells her lackeys to target the kids in neon gimp masks. Whilst back upstairs, Prince just boasts about how he was totally stalling by keeping Tressie up here so she couldn't keep the peace down there, and knew it was only a matter of time before a bunch of ghetto kids kicked off during a rival rap battle and initiated some black-on-black violence. And now he's going to get all the votes he needs to pass Bill 121 and knock the towers down, given the clash was broadcast by the local news and shit. And after Robyn's kid sister reveals that she somehow knows about their secret identities and how they like to rob innocent people out of pure jealousy just for being rich, they dump their silly costumes with her before getting called by the sheriff, who promptly arrests our heroes despite her having no grounds to arrest them. Well, unless it was for crimes against music earlier. And we end with Tressie feeling like a right mug, thinking she could reason with a patriarchal straight white male with a fuck ton of power and money. Because that's like the most evil demographic in today's society, according to mainstream media and woke Hollywood nowadays. And presumably, she's now rather regretting not taking his previous proposition of cash stem cell therapy in a brand new house what he offered her in the second eppy, nor his perfectly reasonable offer for another new house from this eppy either. Before the freckly sheriff is handed Robyn's bow as evidence, and soon realises she's only gone and finally caught the hood, as Robyn's soon put on a bus heading to prison. And in a shocking twist, what no one could ever see coming, it's full of ethnic minority peeps who insist they didn't do nothing. And that's it. That's episode 6. Though my favourite part was when Robyn urged her mum not to platform John Prince in her house because he's so dangerous, even though she's the one who twice broke into his gaff, stole all his stuff, and then kidnapped his fucking son last week. What? But anyway, on to episode 7. We start with the naughty hood lot being taken into a super secret holding area, as the pissed off Asian mayor totally bollocks that freckly sheriff for illegally holding suspected criminals against their will in an off the books black site. But she says, I found an empty bow with no arrows, which could constitute a dangerous weapon if anyone was able to obtain some ammo or just whittle some pointy sticks. So that's totally reasonable grounds, bro. And I'm going to finally unmask the naughty hood lot once and for all. After the opening titles, said freckly sheriff slings the Sherwood residents in cages and promptly tells them to rat out the hood members already, before proceeding to get her own fingerprints all over the antique bow and then snapping the sole piece of evidence she collected for shits and giggles.
Not a great plan.
After interrogating poor Tuck by using his lack of legal identity against him and also cutting out his fingertip tech implants, ROBYN feels guilty about letting all her neighbours be locked up in the press for no fucking reason, so promptly volunteers herself to be questioned next, despite being able to end the suffering of her community members at any time by just taking responsibility and confessing to her own fucking crimes. So the goons drag her out of the cage whilst the sheriff tortures the others by cruelly blasting some Coldplay tunes on repeat through the speakers. Whoops, I mean painfully repetitive warbling sounds. Whilst over in a temporary office, Sheriff Freckleface is totally torturing the suspects with her de-stress positions. But unfortunately, no fucker will talk, until her super cunning yet highly unethical plan is interrupted by a local social worker with terrible acting skills, who says she's been sent by the Asian mayor to keep an eye on her little operation and make sure she don't do any bad things like human rights abuses or casual racialisms, despite her having just walked in on a white copper torturing 3 ethnic minority ladies against a small wall. No! Anyway, the weirdly nervous social worker sets about trying to talk to the prisoners, who promptly complain about how the local police have spent all day cutting chunks out of their mate Tuck, and have seemingly even scooped out a quarter of his hair. Damn! Whilst elsewhere, said Asian mayor totally confronts billionaire capitalist John Prince about trying to get Bill 121 moved up a week, given he's now got enough support to get it passed, and the one remaining thorn in his side, who has the power of vetoing the bill as a last resort to totally screw him, proceeds to arrogantly boast about being the one remaining thorn in his side that can totally screw him. And before you can say, it's probably not the smartest idea to tell a ruthless determined businessman to his face that you'll stop at nothing to thwart his plans, we cut back to Budget Gitmo, where the social worker continues to try to get to know the mostly peaceful criminal captives, and after much totally bollocks her for calling her by a proper name of Michelle like any nice and polite person would, she says she don't want to talk to no stinking social worker who keeps triggering her by accidentally implying she's useless. So ROBYN intervenes and says if you really feel bad for us and want to help, then you should smuggle us in a Nokia 3310 already. But the jittery nervous social worker is too jittery and nervous for that, and tries to maintain her impartiality by advising them to just rat out their friends already. Whilst the woman who was happy to let innocent members of her own beloved community be oppressed and caged up for her own criminal actions, just accuses a social worker of teaming up with a white man and she. Or white woman, I suppose. Also, meanwhile, ROBYN's little sister Jill is hanging out with her teeny bopper crush, David, who hilariously starts raiding her cookie jar only to find a stash of frigging condoms just sitting on her kitchen counter.
Okay.
So naturally, they just laugh about her kinky weirdo family on the sofa before having a quick snog. Whilst back at the phony fakey prison cell, the totally not suspicious social worker delivers the gang a box of tampons as a sign of good faith. And luckily, the dopey manufacturers seem to have left an old phone in the packet, so ROBYN soon gets on the blower and calls up her sibling, who just can't believe her first kiss is being interrupted by a stinking sis who's banging on about being held in a secret off-site cage by a bunch of fascist crooked cops. But unfortunately, the head of the fascist crooked cops totally catches her arch-nemesis trying to grass her up and calling for help from a Virginia miner. So she sets about punishing ROBYN by hanging little John up by his wrists and ogling his chocolatey body.
Nice.
And also having him shocked with a taser wielded by some rando in a bunny costume for some reason. Anyway, Jill then tells David that the hood won't be going to save her thieving sis and her criminal pals, and promptly explains how she found the hood's costumes in a random vent at the local community hall, so it's now up to them and she. But luckily, David totally recognises the background tune what she could hear playing over the speakers whilst on the phone, because turns out he's an undocumented migrant who was also once kept in those cages as a kid whilst being tortured with endless Chris Martin tunes, and soon confesses to being a full-blown illegal alien. And instead of saying, "Get the frig out of my house and country, Mr. Naughty Criminal Boy," she gives him a comforting hand and listens to his tragic backstory about how his family entered Canada without permission and promptly got locked up by immigration control, who then rightly deported his illegal daddy. After the gang begin to go stir crazy and all start to turn on each other whilst cooped up in a small cage, ROBYN says she's ready to see the social worker and rat out all her friends. Whilst outside Little John's torture room, the sheriff tells a random bunny fella that the suspects are asking to see him. And in a shocking twist, what no one could ever see coming, turns out the nervous social worker with the blatantly phony persona was secretly working with a corrupt freckly copper all along.
No way!
Yes way. And speaking of corrupt officials, John tells the Asian mayor that he's basically won their tiresome battle over Bill 121 and to just take the L and get on board already, or else he's going to totally tank her reputation by going full George Soros and funding even more riots across Sherwood, then letting the biased media frame a false narrative and shit. After Robyn convinces the phony fakey social worker that she wants to make a full confession in private, she's led into a back room where she promptly engages in a bout of black-on-black violence, before tying the poor caseworker to a small chair and saying, "I know you're undercover because your acting is somehow worse than every other piss-poor so-called actor on this show." And after she drops the ruse and smugly says the naughty hoodfellas ain't got a fat chance in hell of getting out of here now, Robyn finds a fancy dress outfit what she uses to beat prisoners in order to maintain a ludicrous level of plausible deniability if a case ever went to court, and totally saves her chocolatey bae. And the ginger sheriff just can't believe she's been made to look a right mug 7 weeks in a fucking row, whilst Jill and David arrive decked out in the stolen hood gear and just in the nick of time, and probably drive them all the heck out of Dodge already. Later, said muggy sheriff, what keeps losing to a bunch of kids, presumably because she's the type what loves destroying evidence unnecessarily, totally bollocks the phony fakey social worker for failing to gain their trust and get a confession due to her truly terrible and totally transparent acting ability. Whilst back in Sherwood, Robyn thanks her teenage sis for saving her dopey ass from getting caught by the local filth, and for rescuing her before she had to potentially take responsibility for her own actions. But also says that although it was quite impressive how you managed to drive a massive bus despite not having a full driver's licence yet, you're much too young to join the team full time, so shut up about it already. Also later, an anxious little Jonathan turns up at her gaff and chats some vague shit about having vague secrets and shit. But she don't care about no shit and vague secrets and shit. So she soon pays a visit to the local contraceptive store before snogging his face off and shagging his brains out.
Nice.
Whilst elsewhere, the sheriff bursts into Prince's penthouse and catches him doing some cringy dad dancing to the main title theme.
Oh, good lord!
And before you can say, did they make this actor perform the dance without any backing track on set, or does the poor sod just have zero rhythm, she hands him back his priceless antique bow what Robyn stole in the first epi, and that the sheriff just casually snapped in two earlier, whilst he proceeds to celebrate Bill 121 finally passing, with a copious amount of booze and even more uncoordinated cringy dad dancing. And we end with Robyn getting an unexpected deposit slid under her crack. Did he? Informing her that Bill 121 has totally passed, and now her entire family, including her crippled mum, what loves annoying ruthless rich blokes to the point of lifelong paralysis, have totally been evicted like some random Big Brother contestants and shit. And that's it. That's episode 7. Though my favourite part was Robyn and the gang being all butthurt about finally facing consequences for all their criminal actions over the past few months, who just couldn't believe they finally got their comeuppance after spending weeks robbing from the rich to give to themselves, especially after uploading videos to YouTube bragging about their criminal antics and presumably then just pocketing the ad revenue and stuff. But anyway, that's the plot and that's your lot. Considering that moving, so you don't miss me roasting the season and presumably series finale next week. Tell me if you like this show in the comments if you have time, and I'll see you in the next one.